Hello Internet and welcome to Collective Arcana. We are a channel all about tabletop gaming, and today we're going to talk about how to build encounters in Pathfinder Second Edition. This is sort of an add-on to our little mini-series we were doing on building interesting encounters. Someone asked us to do a video just on encounter building in general in Pathfinder Second Edition, and we definitely thought it was worth doing because the encounter building rules are pretty unique compared to many other D20 systems. So here we go. Before we get going, we do ask you to please like, subscribe, hit those buttons down there. If you haven't already, it really does help out the channel. We really appreciate it, and lets us know we're doing a good job. Thanks. So in Pathfinder Second Edition, each enemy, whether that is an NPC or a monster, has a level assigned, just like a player might. If you're thinking this is something like the challenge rating or CR from other games like D&D or Pathfinder First Edition, you are wrong. Actually, you're right. But as often happens when you are bringing expectations or assumptions from one edition to another or one game to another, you are exactly the right amount of right to cause yourself some trouble. So for that reason, I'm going to ask you, if you do not already know about Pathfinder Second Edition encounter rules, or even if you're just not sure that you do, come at me here with a clean slate. Do not bring anything from another edition into this, because it's not going to serve you. So once you have your creature's level, you're going to compare that creature's level to the level of your party. Now, your party level may not all be one level. It could be an average. I recommend you don't ever let anyone be more than 2 levels above anybody else. But that's a different video for a different day. So you compare it to your average party level, whatever that may be, and then you're going to from there, you're going to find out, is it on level? Is it less than or greater than the party's level? So for example, if it's the same level as your party, then it's going to cost your budget 40 points to use that monster. Of course, if it's a lower level than your party, it's going to be worth less for your budget. And if it's a higher level than your party, it's going to be worth a lot more. Luckily, we do have a handy chart. So what is your budget? Well, your budget sort of depends on how tough you want that encounter to be for your players. Luckily, again, we have a chart. Now, here is the big flashing red lights, alarms sounding big thing here to keep in mind. The Pathfinder Second Edition encounter building rules work, okay? That may seem like a strange thing to make a big deal about, but if you are a veteran in the hobby, you will know this does not happen very often, especially not with D20-based D&D iterative games, D&D and Pathfinder, or just not a lot of games in general. So seriously, use these rules. Do not try to just slap down a few monsters and wing it, because that's going to cause your party or you a lot of problems. You want to build with these rules as they're presented. If you're going to make alterations, you want to make sure that you 100% know the actual rules and how to use them, and B, have a very, very good reason to go outside of those rules, because again, can't stress this enough, they work. So back to the subject of those difficulty levels, that most recent chart that we showed. Keep in mind, when you see that extreme encounter, that is extreme, okay? So what does that mean? That means that if you use an extreme encounter, there is a very real chance that your party will completely wipe. Every member will die or be taken out of combat in such a way that there is no real hope for them surviving, unless you have some, cobbled together reason for them to do so. Do not use an extreme encounter unless you are ready for extreme results. Cannot be stressed enough. Even a severe encounter can lead to a bunch of dead players, depending on how rested they are, how many resources they've expended, is their HP not at full. It can also depend on if they're just not a solid teamwork group. Teamwork is very important in Pathfinder Second Edition, especially at higher combat difficulty levels. So if your players are not able to handle that, you want to avoid a severe encounter as well, unless you are really telegraphing and letting them know, how hard it's going to be and what they need to do to succeed. Both of those difficulty levels are really going to need the dice in your party's favor to avoid disaster. Doesn't mean you should never use them, just means you should use them both sparingly. It also means that you shouldn't just look at that chart, see that moderate is sort of in the middle, and assume that all of your combats should be moderate threats. Because again, that extreme should not be part of your normal rotation. It is, it's not something that you want to use more than probably once, maybe twice in your game. So take extreme off that table, and you'll see that moderate shares the middle now with low. So you want to sort of bounce back and forth between low and moderate threat. If you want to make the party feel good about how strong they're getting, or you just sort of want to do a palate cleanser or a warm-up fight, then that's what the trivial encounters are for. It can be very tempting as a GM to just never have trivial encounters because you're like, well, we already know who's going to win. What's the point? Well, your players might just want to, show off to each other all their cool stuff that they can do. It's also good to show them how far they've come. If you're giving them a trivial encounter that a few levels ago was a moderate or even, severe encounter, and then them seeing how they're able to handle the same creatures just a couple of levels later, how much easier it is for them. That's a lot of fun. It shows growth, and it can be used narratively as well, to show that it's time to maybe move on from what they're doing or things of that nature. And severe should be your boss fights for your big arcs that you're coming out of. Anytime you want something to have impact, that's what the severe encounter is for. It is dangerous. There's a real chance you could lose a party member, possibly more if the dice are not going favorably. See my previous disclaimer. But with proper prep time, assuming that they're not careless with items or resources, and are coming into the fight relatively fresh in terms of at least HP, then severe should be your big ticket boss fights. Again, extreme is exactly that. It's extreme. Do not build that type of encounter unless you or your players are okay with player character death. That's it. Another note on this encounter budget, we'll put it back up here again. It will tell you how to adjust your budget based on if you have more or less than the assumed 4-member party. So if you have fewer than 4, you want to subtract the amount shown at that encounter threat level for each player you have less than 4. And if you have more, then you want to add that amount to your encounter budget for each additional player. Now, for those of you coming from another edition and saying, well, how can you have this sort of sliding encounter difficulty with just based on these character levels and then this experience budget, and how does that translate to actually gaining experience and leveling up? Well, very easily and very well, actually. And that's because of how Pathfinder Second Edition handles XP. Each level is 1,000 experience. That's it. It does not get progressively higher and more experience required to gain each level, so you do not need to have an XP amount for each creature level because it's all just relative to the party with the same goal of 1,000 experience to level up. Note, even if you're using milestone leveling, which is sort of my traditional way to GM, you still should be using these encounter budgets. The only difference is you're just not going to award that experience at the end, but it will still tell you how to build a balanced encounter. So don't just say, oh, I don't use experience, this video is not for me. It's for you. So now just some sort of loose examples of how you would use that chart to create an encounter. So you would look at the first chart, you would see that let's say you found a creature that's about the same level as your party. Looking at that chart, you know that it's worth 40 points, and then we'd look at our encounter budget. We see for a moderate encounter, we can have 2 of these creatures. Or we could go with creatures that are 2 levels below the party, and we can have 4 of those creatures. And so on and so on. So if you want just a whole lot, a swarm of bad guys that your party's really able to, mow through, that are just sort of, taking up space or, as fodder for a much larger fighter bad guy, those lower threat monsters, you can use a lot of them. Alternatively, if you want just a great big monster fight, not necessarily in size, but in danger, then you can go with a creature that is 2 levels above. and that will, on its own, be a moderate encounter for your party. Now, moderate encounter, again, does not mean that it's average. It's possible, depending on how dice or tactics go, that players could go down, but it's unlikely that they'll stay down or die, and it's very unlikely to have a TPK at this level. But there is still some real threat, and your party will probably have to burn through some resources. So again, just sort of, 4 creatures a couple levels below the party, 2 creatures on level with the party, 1 creature 2 levels higher than the party. And that's it. I mean, that's not going to change. The actual numbers that you're looking at in terms of levels for both your party and the creatures will change, but those sort of rules, those tables, are universal. They're going to play out the entire time. Remember, when you're adjusting an encounter for more or less players, it's always better to remove a creature than weaken a creature that's already there. Just like if you're adding XP budget because of additional players, it's always better to add an additional creature instead of buff an existing creature, or use a higher level one. The reason for that is because, again, 1 creature that is a couple levels above the party is a lot more dangerous, than 2 that are the same level. So you always want to, just the way that the +10, -10 works, that's just recommended that you try to avoid raising up a level just because you've got a larger than average party. Just as an example, let's say you have an extra, 3 characters. You've got a 7-person party. You may be tempted to send a creature that is, 6 levels above the party, because you find out that if you do the math, you sort of got the budget for it. The problem is the way the +10, -10 works, the way the bonded proficiency works. Your players are going to be completely unable to fight that monster. They're going to be getting crit every single attack. They're going to be critically missing most of their attacks. It's not good. So, you want to keep those monsters within a couple of levels, even if you find out that you've got the budget to sort of go ham on one monster. If you really do just want to adjust a monster, let's say that you want a moderate encounter of a couple of creatures, but they are a couple of levels too high or too low than for the encounter budget that you have, or the type of fight that you want to set up, based on roleplay wise, the party knows they're going to fight these things, and you realize, oh no, these monsters are about a level or 2 shy of where I wanted them to be in either direction. There's good news. There are what are called level adjustments or creature adjustment templates. And there's the elite, which will raise a creature up 1 level, and there's the weak, which will lower a creature 1 level. You don't want to apply these too many times. The math can start to not play out as well once you're at about your 3rd or so, just in my experience. But it probably won't be too far off, really. You just don't expect that you can take a creature that is supposed to be a level 5 and have it ready to be a level 10 creature and have that math play out exactly the same as other level 10 creatures. It can work, you just have to be careful. Make sure that, before you actually start rolling dice, that you double check it against another creature of that level. See if maybe this didn't adjust the right way, it's a little too low, this adjusted a little too high. Just do the extra work. It'll save you and your party a lot of headache. There are also some theme templates that you can apply. There are some theme templates for NPCs, so you can make them feel more like they're parts of certain organizations within Golarion, which, again, even if you're homebrewing like I do, you can sort of slot those into existing organizations and creatures pretty easily within your world. There are also some templates for various types of undead and lycanthropic were creatures. So if you just really want that gnoll to also be a were gnoll, were hyena, you can do that. So that's the gist of building an encounter in Pathfinder Second Edition. I cannot recommend enough, as I've said, say it again because it does bear repeating. These rules work. Please use these rules. If you do not use these rules, you're going to find your creatures are either too weak or too strong, and it's going to either make your combats consistently boring or lethal. And nobody wants either of those things. I mean, if you're running a meat grinder campaign, have at it. There's a lot of ways to kill your players in these bestiaries, especially if you're just throwing severe encounters at them. And not to step on your fun. That can be a lot of fun to see. What can this party beat? As fun little experiments as an aside. Take them aside and say, hey, this is we're just hanging out, having fun this week. Instead of something, let's just build some crazy encounters and see how you guys handle it. That's great. But make sure everyone knows, either going into the campaign or into the just little skirmish, that whatever you're doing, make sure they know how dangerous what they're going to fight is. And you can do that through storytelling, through NPCs. You don't just have to tell them, hey, that monster's scary, it's probably a couple levels above you. You can always let the story tell the players, NPCs or what they see. As we're mentioning in these other videos, you can always let that tell the story to your players about how dangerous what they're about to fight is. So that's it. Thanks for watching. Hopefully you learned something. Definitely let me know down in the comments if you have any questions, or you want us to go any more specific deep dive into anything. We're always happy to do it if we have time. And we'll try to make time as much as we can. Thanks so much for watching. Welcome to the Collective. We'll see you next time.